Could Google Chrome be sold? Well, if the US Justice Department has its way, we could see the world's most popular browser sold off to appease some monopoly accusations. What does this mean for Google? And there are also some interesting developments in how Android is affected. Let's get into it, give you the lowdown, and hopefully explain some things that maybe were a little bit confusing ahead of time. If you're all as personally invested in all the machinations of this, then hit the subscribe button to get all of the inside scoop, plus a little of what me basically riffing on what could happen. Hit that subscribe button, join the channel. Cheers. So just a few days ago, the US Justice Department went out and reiterated what steps it wants to, or at least a judge, to take to address Google's monopoly in online search. We all know just how much of a massive market share Google does have in this space. It's no secret at this point in time, but the DOJ is effectively gunning for the tech giant and claims that the Mountain View firm has illegally abused a monopoly in the search industry. Under the previous Biden administration, way back in November, the DOJ shared their draft proposal and an updated version was filed just a few days ago, which is why this is being brought up again ahead of a hearing coming very soon in April. The government still wants Google to divest or effectively sell Chrome since it's, quote, an important search access point. This is to, quote, provide an opportunity for a new rival to operate a significant gateway to search the internet free of Google's monopoly control. They're really strong words there, but it's unclear what a future buyer would do with the open source Chromium project aspect of Chrome. That's actually the building blocks for this piece of software, and it means that other developers out there can build their own browsers off the back of the Chromium framework. That's arguably one of the biggest talking points as this proposed breakup of big tech. Just what happens to the products that end up in new hands, or potentially will end up in new hands, and are still used by everyday people every day, basically. There are some interesting questions that get raised here if this all does go through as a result of that. Can Google continue to contribute to the open source Chromium project? Does this effectively mean that development will slow or cease if it looks like the DOJ is going to get its way? What happens to the hundreds of millions of Chromebooks out there already on the market, as that is a Chrome OS based piece of hardware? That's a potential disaster on its own and probably deserves its own video, but yeah. It's an interesting time for Chrome and for Google. I'm just sorry to say that even with lots of industry experience, we genuinely simply have no idea what that looked like because there's nothing like this has happened before. This is more of a thought experiment though, but what would you continue to use Chrome if, say, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos bought it? Because realistically, there are not many people out there who could afford to buy Chrome. Who out there is A, going to be a potential buyer and have the deep pockets to do so, and B, is going to be able to provide the same development time and effort to such a ubiquitous browser? I think it's certainly true that Chrome is one of the at least leading drivers of traffic to Google services. That's no real secret at this point in time. Heck, I'm sure if you ask 100 people out there, at least 75% of those who you would ask would use Chrome anyway. According to the most recent public data, Chrome has almost 70% of the worldwide browser market share, which is absolutely huge, and that is a substantial amount of people. Safari is next with around 20%, and that's bundled and only available on Apple and iOS devices. And even Microsoft Edge, which is now based upon Chromium itself, only has around 5%. Everyone else makes up around 6%, and that does include the one-time market leader Firefox with just a 2% global market share. What's to stop another browser from becoming the dominant option, you're probably asking yourself? Could the team or company behind that browser funnel traffic through their own services and effectively end up in the same position as Google in just a few years? Well, surely the cat is out of the bag now. Are people going to switch away from Google devices, or Google services that is? I'd argue no, but it's irrelevant to what the DOJ actually wants. There is, though, some really good news to come out of this latest filing, of this latest update, because we were worried about what would happen to Android ahead of time. Well, again, there is some strange stuff here, at least some strange wording, despite the confusion around Chrome and the potential breakup of Chrome itself. The DOJ is no longer giving Google the option to sell Android, which I think is arguably a very good thing. Instead, they want Google to implement various changes, although it's not clear what those changes would be at this stage. It could be similar to how you have to choose things like the default search engine on EU devices, or maybe we'll even be able to choose default on-device stores, things like that. Maybe you'll get offered the option to skip installing GMS altogether during the initial setup phase. At this stage, we're purely speculating, but changes will come whether we like it or not. Here's the kicker though. If those measures don't make the market more competitive, Google could actually be forced to sell the operating system even if they make these changes. That's realistically a worst case scenario, and one that I think realistically isn't going to be on the cards unless something truly drastic or bad happens in the interim. A world where OEMs are responsible again for maintaining and building the core OS, in this case Android. Personally, I wouldn't want that to happen again, as it was a bad time, and it feels like we're finally actually starting to see brands take updates and improvements seriously after the horrendously fragmented era that we had in the early days of Android circa 10-15 years ago. Google really does drive this platform forward. Of course, they own the platform, naturally for profit. They're going to be doing things to make more profits, but taking a greater control of the operating system in recent years and almost strong-arming some of the OEMs into introducing certain features and functions has been actually to the benefit of almost all Android phones out there, as more stringent rules are put in place for the partners, and it just means we get a better experience. That fragmentation, is not necessarily as pronounced. And to be honest, I could easily see a huge switch from Android to iOS in Apple's favor if Google were actually forced to sell Android. I doubt anyone could manage the operating system and all of its intricate layers, all while ensuring the partners, the biggest sellers of Android devices, get the tools required to update their own hardware. It's good that this change has been made, as it could have effectively created a new smartphone monopoly due to the US government's lack of knowledge of how these platforms work, and seeing people scurry over to iOS might not be a good thing for everyone. As I say, it will just mean one company, especially in the US market anyway, is technically driving all of smartphones abroad and in their own country. Another notable from this latest filing is that a proposal for Google to sell its investments in AI startups has been removed. Anthropic, which is another rival, as it were, to Gemini and some of those other services, told the US government that it actually requires Google's financing to continue operating, and this change comes after the government found that this restriction could, quote, cause unintended consequences in the evolving AI space. And to that end, the DOJ will not ban Google from investing in AI firms. Instead, the Mountain View tech giant will need to provide notice to allow for reviews of each proposed transaction or investment. Given the importance of AI, and in particular Gemini, plus the emergence of Chinese and global AI alternatives, this at least seems like a wise move from the US government, given the potential to shape the future with these growing technologies, and it's a little bit protectionary for their own services and internal brands. Other DOJ requests do remain in place, and Google is expected to file its revised proposal very, very soon. In December, Google proposed its own changes to Android and browser contracts that could remove some licensing agreements around some of the preloaded or the default applications installed on your phone when you actually set this up for the first time. After next month's hearing, though, a final ruling is expected before September 2025. Google has already said it would appeal the underlying decision, so we're none the wiser as to what will actually happen, but we're getting some potentially industry-shaking changes, whether we like it or not. Some of this might work out well, I must admit, but other decisions do boggle the mind a little bit. The breakup of big tech companies like Google is certainly on the agenda for 2025 and beyond. I want to ask you though, what do you think of this? Do you think this is a good decision, a bad decision? Are you indifferent to it? Let us know what you think down in the comment sections below, and keep in mind that we just simply do not know what the future holds, and things will definitely evolve quickly over the coming months. And as far as we're aware, Google has not stopped developing software or these platforms, so at the very least we will get experiences that improve over time until something happens with this ruling. Cheers for watching though, and hopefully that's explained some of the things that's happened with this ruling and what it means for you, the services you use, and I will speak to you later.